So welcome everybody. Welcome to the first EMA Industry Knowledge Share 2021 with Aspect Communications. 2021 is clearly starting where 2020 left off, but there is, fingers crossed, some light at the end of the tunnel. So let's work, as I said, be positive. Let's get 2021 in a pivotal year, both for our industry, our businesses, and EMA. We've discussed how Zoom fatigue is now a major problem across the business. We want to be returning to live. Sorry, we won't be returning to live anytime soon. So we need to look at ways of how we engage with audiences, be it internal, external, national, or international. Some major but exciting challenges ahead, I think, in the coming 6 to 12 months. As such, I'd like to introduce Aspect Communications, who are going to talk to us a little bit about what they do and how they do it. A virtual reality, that's the big question. The future of events. So today we're joined by Aspect. Aspects are experts in virtual and hybrid events. They tell me they've been doing them for over 20 years, even predating the internet and using ISDN2. I mean, God, ISDN, I remember that used to wind up, but many of you won't even remember that stuff, but the old ISDN lines. I'm old enough to remember that. They work with companies such as State Street, BP, Marks and Spencer's, Atos, Danone, Orange, to name but a few. They were recently appointed as a preferred partner for virtual for leading global tech company. Who said they selected them for their creative strengths, digital first thinking, global capabilities, and world-class delivery. So really exciting to hear their thoughts on the industry in 2021 and beyond. So joining us from Aspect is Jo Randall, the CEO. Jo joined Aspect 20 years ago as a junior producer and has worked her way up to the role of CEO. Congratulations, Jo. Still a producer at heart. She's still heavily involved in program design for her clients. Zoe Daniels, Zoe's head of developing client experiences. Zoe has over 15 years of event and account management experience and joined Aspects a year ago to oversee their client service delivery. And finally, Simon Mogford. Simon is director of marketing and sales. And in fact, Simon and I used to work together many years ago at First Protocol, where he was my right hand on business development. So you've got yourself a good guy there, Jo. But guys, really interested in hearing from you. And today we're going to be talking about the events industry in 2021 and beyond, where we are, the evolution of virtual, the future of live, the role of hybrid, and strategic businesses what strategy businesses will need to adopt longer term and take advantage of the full mix. So I'm going to kick off and hand over to you, Simon.
Brilliant, thanks Richard. Great to be back involved with the EMA, even if it's only for the next 40 minutes or so. I think there are some familiar faces behind those turned off cameras. I spotted one or two of you on the names there. So looking forward to reconnecting with you and discussing this topic with you later in the webinar. For my part, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to set the scene for today's session. As a business, we usually deliver around 200 mainly live events a year around the world. But like everyone on this call, things changed dramatically for us in March last year. This infographic shows our activity for April to December and really illustrates the pivot that we and our clients made in response to the pandemic. Now, we actually secured 8 new clients last year and are now in a fortunate position where we're targeting year-on-year growth when our financial year ends in April. Now, for many of our clients, the rapid and unexpected transition to virtual events in 2020 created a huge amount of anxiety. Many were taken out of their comfort zone and needed to learn new skills, research online platforms, and work with untried suppliers. And of course, they needed to get comfortable with running events remotely and not being in control, not something that comes naturally to any of us as event managers. So from the essentials of platform advice and format design through to content development, the speaker coaching, the technical production side of things, we've helped our clients to transform their face-to-face events into inspiring virtual experiences. And as an agency, I think we feel proud that we've kept our clients engaging the people that matter most to them during the difficult times of last year. But I think 2021 is going to be a different year for a number of reasons, not least because we can be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to looking and setting our event strategy. Now, we commissioned a piece of research at the end of last year looking at the future of the industry, which has shaped our strategy for the year ahead and, of course, informed the content for today's discussion. But before we get into that, I'd just like to run a quick poll. And I just wanted to do a quick sense check, really, and say, when do the people on this call, when do you plan to hold your first live event? And by live, I mean getting at least 50 people together for a half day. So pretty simple, but a fairly typical piece of what we would have seen previously as a B2B event. So if I can run that poll, please. And if we can see the results. Okay, so it's interesting. This is a slightly more optimistic group than the findings from our research paper has shown. I see some of you are looking to hold a live event in Q2, the majority in Q3, and then an even split in Q4 in 2022. So I think there's quite an even split there. As I say, it's a little bit more optimistic than our research suggests. So if we just close that poll down, based on the research that we conducted at the end of last year, the result was suggestion that there was going to be no meaningful live B2B events in 2021. Now, everybody that we'd spoken to, would love live events to return, but there was a unanimous feeling that most of 2021 will be virtual, primarily due to the timings of vaccination programs, individual priorities for travel, and how safe people perceive events to be. I think in addition, there was a sense that people's appetite to attend business events will be secondary to personal experiences. So consumer events will need to lead the way. And I know, speaking just from personal experience, I'll be wanting to go to the theatre or go to a sporting event before I go to a conference. And I'm can only just start imagining this morning the excitement of actually having a ticket to go to something. So our research showed that people's priorities to travel anywhere will be based, first of all, around visiting friends and family. Secondly, about meeting colleagues in local and regional offices. And I, for one, I joined Aspect in November, so I'm looking forward to meeting my colleagues at some point. 3, holidays, and then 4, business events. And I think when live does return, we're likely to see some signature, more exclusive experiences surrounded by virtual and/or hybrid. So, from our perspective, it's certain that virtual is here to stay, and in our view is going to be the only event channel until 2022. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Zoe to talk about how we see the virtual landscape evolving this year. Zoe.
Thanks very much, Simon. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. I think over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the virtual landscape has evolved or is going to evolve over the next sort of 12 months or so. As Simon did, before I get started, I would really like to hear your opinion, please, just on how you feel about the virtual environment at the moment. So if we can just show the poll slide, please. So how would you describe your experiences of running virtual events so far? If we can pop that poll up. Thank you. Lovely. And if we can show the results. That's really, really interesting. I think that's certainly how I feel about it. And I'm really glad to see that I'm not alone in that. Thank you very much. If we can close that down. Brilliant. So, we've come such a long way, I think, in the last 10 months, haven't we? There's no doubt at all in my mind that virtual has always been with us, but it's evolved incredibly quickly from being the backup plan to plan A in 2020. And it's had such a steep learning curve along with it as well. So where is virtual heading? Simon quite boldly said we don't really see a return to live in a meaningful way this year. And I know that's quite a bold statement that we're making, but for all the reasons that Simon outlined, it's clear to me that the focus for 2021 has to be on enhancing the virtual experience. On any given day, for all of us, there are so many distractions, emails pinging in, doorbell going, children needing help with their homework, puppy eating your favourite shoes, that might just be me. 2021 requires a step up in standard if business objectives are going to be met. The competition for people's time and attention has never been fiercer. And as an industry, we've seen that there is a huge opportunity for virtual through wider reach, better data, reduced environmental impact. But if the impact of virtual events on business in terms of ROI, sales growth, revenue generation, employee engagement is to match that of live, businesses really are going to need to raise their game this year. This is now an established way of communicating. And audiences are going to be less forgiving than they were in 2020, I think that's for sure. So how can we do it? How can we do it? We all know that Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and we can absolutely avoid it by creating better agenda design, by creating emotionally charged narratives, that the red thread that your audience can connect with, by developing more engaging formats. For example, we're doing a lot of TV quality broadcast events at the moment, streamed from studios or building studios in our clients' offices. And I can see that approach expanding more and more as we go through 2021. And whilst we still want to see the important elements of a live event in the virtual space, the content, the human connection, bringing that event to life, mimicking live events of, creating that walkthrough experience isn't the answer. One excitement, builds anticipation and provokes a conversation, both in. Oh, bear with me, sorry.
Oh, yeah, Zoe, you're losing a little bit of bandwidth there.
I lost my connection. Sorry, our audience have shorter attention spans, so focused content and sharing content in new and creative ways is an absolute must. Introducing motion graphics into presentations, evolving presenter storytelling techniques that will engage audiences. Interactivity has been and will continue to be really, really important. We have to keep improving on it, and I would always recommend building in interactivity every 5 to 7 minutes. Content needs to be designed with 3 types of virtual viewer in mind. We've got our multitaskers. The virtual event is on in the background, but they're doing other things. They're working, they're doing their children's homework, whatever that might be. We've got appointment setters, the folk that turn up fully focused. They're fully engaged. They have dedicated their time in their diary to come and be part of your virtual event. And then we've got the binge watchers, those that want everything in one hit at a time that works for them in their diary. They're not bothered by the live virtual experience. They just want it on demand. So broadcast values will become more important. I talked a little bit about it earlier. Even when we're using Teams or Zoom, new technologies, I think, are going to become increasingly affordable. Introducing AR, mixed reality, motion graphics, where it's appropriate to do so is going to help early adopters to stand out from the competition and gain greater traction. Platforms are developing all the time. It's fair to say that some are better than others. I haven't yet found, and I honestly don't think there's one platform out there that will tick every box, that will achieve everything you need it to for your business objectives. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we will have to adopt different solutions for different business objectives. I think more immersive and interactive platforms will be used as we get more creative with ideas on how to engage into audiences in 2021 and gather intelligence. We must, I think outside of the platform box. We have the opportunity to optimize events and solutions for virtual audiences rather than in the past where the virtual audience has felt a little bit like an add-on. Virtual is a fantastic channel for providing impact. You know, we think about social media and what sort of impact social media is having on our personal lives at the moment. You know, for me, Instagram and TikTok, you know, I'm not suggesting necessarily that they are the right platforms for business conversations, not at all. But there is a huge opportunity, I think, for us to better use business social channels to provoke conversation and engage audiences in ways that we're not really scratching the surfaces of at the moment. And we can't ignore at all, I think, that there's a fairly unanimous feeling amongst the industry that networking at virtual events just hasn't worked very well in 2020. Particularly those events that really rely on relationship building and networking for to hit their ROI. We're seeing improvements in networking platforms in the virtual environment. There's one in particular, Shindig, that is replicating networking and social functions pretty well. We do expect that area to keep evolving rapidly as we move through the year. But, you know, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think that they will ever have the same impact as face-to-face networking and relationship building. My personal belief is that marketing strategies will need to be rethought in this area, particularly as we move through 2021, gosh. So I think it's fair to say that all of this has had significant implications on how we as event managers need to evolve our event mix as we move forward through this year. We need to think differently about how we engage and retain our audiences. And I think at this point then it's a really nice segue for me to hand over to Jo. Jo's going to talk to us a little bit about her perspective on the future events in general. So Jo, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Zoe, and hello, everyone. Really nice to be with you today. So without doubt, we are surrounded by challenges, aren't we? A pandemic, Brexit, giving us travel disruptions, deep recession, meaning budgets being squeezed, travel budgets perhaps not even being reinstated after all of the travel bans from last year, and even risks around venues or suppliers going bust. Will they be around in 2021 when you need them? So all of this creates a bit of a perfect storm, doesn't it? That means that live, physical or actual, call it what you want, won't be coming back for a while. So I've been running events for 24 years and I've not seen so much change in such a short space of time. Aspect has gone from designing 2 or 3 day event programs to 3-hour broadcasts literally overnight, from building presentation environments to building TV studios in clients' offices, from having presenters flying all over the world to talking to them directly in their own living rooms. Live events has been catapulted into a virtual world, and yes, we all know and appreciate its challenges and limitations, but it does have some positives. Reduction in travel cost, saved travel hours, and supporting in achieving net carbon goals are some of the big ones. So it won't ever go away, but I'm interested in finding your opinion here again, if that's okay, and some crystal ball prediction times would be really good to hear your thoughts on when things do get better, whenever that might be. We've said some of you recognise that might be later on this year. What importance will virtual have in live events in the future, do you think? Not much, moderate, critical, or will it be the same as live? If we could activate the polling, I'd love your opinion on what importance you think virtual will have. Let's give that a moment and let's have a look at the results. Yeah, very interesting there. A little 2 breakaway groups, a moderate but secondary to live, and it will have the same importance to live. So I've got a 50-50 split. Maybe, hopefully, perhaps the rest of my presentation might convince those that actually virtual importance might be elevated in the future. Let's see how I get on with my presentation. So I'm going to talk today about how virtual can transform live events in the future. So I'm thinking 2022 onwards here, and I'm going to do it through two lenses, because let's face it, content and conversation, they're the two big reasons people attend events. I'm going to start with content first of all, and without doubt, virtual will really help us deliver on delivering really rich content. So virtual gives us an opportunity to look really hard at what our audience want and need. Think about those three categories of people that Zoe mentioned earlier. And then that gives us an opportunity to think about how we can deliver best for them. So there's some really easy low-hanging fruit here, guys. What parts of your conference content lends itself to people watching and digesting information in their own time? Where will that information land and resonate better? Can we make our guest speaker budget go further by having them join remotely rather than jumping on an aeroplane to be with us? What wider audiences can we reach to get that greater engagement and bang for our buck from our events? And how can we turn our virtual event into more of a TV style broadcast to realize greater engagement and impact? So I think that's just the starting point. That's the low hanging fruit that we've got to grab with virtual. But there's some real longer term opportunities that I think are really exciting indeed, and could actually bring about the most exciting changes in the live events industry, perhaps in our lifetimes. What about an integrated event experience, one that includes in-person and digital across different media? Then that suddenly starts sounding very progressive and very exciting and interesting indeed. So I started researching industries and sectors that are doing this integrated approach already and doing it very successfully. And actually I found they are all around us. Consider TED Talk models, for example, where this is an event, but the majority of that audience watch online and consume the content in their own time and on their own schedule. Consider a football match, or indeed any major sporting event for that matter, where there is a simultaneous but very different experience for live and for virtual audiences. Yes, you can buy tickets and get that and attend in person and get that lovely spine-tingling feeling of being there, or you can follow it remotely and have access to extra content such as commentary, interviews and camera replays, or you can do something completely different while it's happening and have goal alerts sent to your phone. And finally, you can catch up on the highlights and commentary later in your own time, should you wish to. And I'm no football expert, I'm pretty sure there's an app in that mix there somewhere too. So that is a truly integrated approach. And imagine the possibilities if we apply that thinking to live events. And suddenly that does sound really exciting, doesn't it? You may have noticed I haven't used the word hybrid yet so far in this future events presentation. And that's because I genuinely feel that ultimately events will be omni-channel, and we'll probably end up dropping the term virtual, live, hybrid, and just talk about events as this holistic event experience with delegates able to participate how they choose to suit their needs and schedules. However, this seems as good a time as any to tackle that H word, the hybrid word, and that's where we're accommodating live and virtual audiences at the same time. For me, the biggest question around hybrid is the resourcing question that poses to us in events. Designing the virtual content and experience will be just as important as designing the live event experience. So both journeys are equally as valuable there. And I think we need to plan and design those that event content and experience as two separate but simultaneous events. So in-house event teams and agencies may need to be divided into two separate streams to plan for these events. So the resourcing will fundamentally need to change. We're so used to, aren't we, at the moment, finishing an event and then that same team then developing the content to go out online. And I think that will be holding us back. I think we need to start planning our resourcing so that we can do both simultaneously to ensure that the physical and the virtual, the digital experience, have the same level of experience and quality to them. So virtual has made our events shorter, hasn't it? And actually, I think that's also a trend that will stay. For me, the days of full day or multi-day meetings as the norm has gone. Yes, there will be the flagship residential travel trips in the future, but I think they'll be far less frequent because events will need to become shorter because ultimately that's more compatible with hybrid audiences. And they'll be more focused on the content and outcome, and think about the best way of delivering that on the most appropriate platform. As Zoe's mentioned, it's very rare to find one platform that fits all. Furthermore, events, I think, will then have to be adapted into more focused sessions. So if one platform doesn't do it all, perhaps we need to be playing to the strengths of different types of platforms. So holding separate networking evenings through to pre-recorded video strategy sessions need to be delivered in a different way. So ultimately, we have a complete opportunity here to reimagine everything. Okay, let's look at our second lens, which is conversation. So we've done content. What about the conversation lens? And from a virtual perspective, Zoe has mentioned networking virtually, and I'm sure we all share the same feeling here, that it's not the same as networking at a real event. That bumping into people in coffee breaks, the spontaneous catch-ups are missing. And without doubt, a great deal of business is done in this way at live events, and its importance can't be underestimated. And for that reason, live will absolutely come back. And I expect there to be lots more choice coming online this year on how to do more structured online networking. Zoe mentioned a couple, but I'm already seeing speed dating techniques and AI being built into platforms to enable you to be able to identify and network with like-minded people. I've also seen platforms now adopting viewing parties, which is quite exciting. And I've also, where you can get together to watch presentations together. And I've also seen a series of drop-in meeting rooms on some sites that actually mirror you going into a room for 6 people. So I think some really exciting developments that will continue through 2021 to enhance that networking experience, which is much needed. In the long term, without doubt, though, events will come back as audience will be craving that networking, entertainment and conversation element. But in the medium term, I believe there's an opportunity to bring local audiences together and link those sites up to form one big event. So inviting smaller audiences together locally, in a safe way, of course, and then inviting them to be part of a much bigger event. Actually, these link-up events are one of my favourite types of event, actually. I find them really exciting and dynamic, and I find the energy and buzz that it creates really spine-tingling. It's a bit like recreating the Eurovision Song Contest, you know, Are You There, Belgium, as you link up your different office sites. What's key here is ensuring that there's two-way interaction between those sites and that there's presentations happening across all of them. And that's when you get a really dynamic but safe event where we're bringing people together, but we're bringing them together safely in local environments. And actually, this is surprisingly really easy and cost-effective to do with Teams and WebEx and all those infrastructures that we already have. And for this, IT becomes an important part of our event planning, but I'm sure that's something that we're all really aware of already at the moment in this day and age. So I am going to just move to my summary now. So currently, we're finding that live is beginning to enhance our virtual experience. So where people are having boxes delivered to their homes to open up with food parcels or surprise packages or gifts. And broadcast TV approaches are being applied to the content to bring virtual content to life. So that's what's happening at the moment. Live is enhancing our virtual experience. But in the future, I think there'll be a much more reciprocal relationship between live and digital. And I'm actually sure that when we think about it, that it will be virtual that will be enhancing our live experience. Thank you very much indeed for listening, and I'll hand back to Richard at this point.
Wow, thanks, Jo. That was really interesting. Lots there. I'd say there's a lot of content there and everything else, but interested for me to hear what you're talking about there, because very similar. Sorry, something jumped up on my screen. I don't know what it is. Very similar to the sort of approach and thoughts and views that I have and we as a committee have and everything else. There's definitely the Zoom fatigue, it's now the new norm. There was that panic. What do we flip to? What do we change to? And everything else, to like, okay, we need to do this. We're now doing that. We've got there. We're at a level now. And it's how can we now make this better and more engagement? So definitely sort of the TV broadcasting engagement style is out there. There's lots to learn about that. What tips can you sort of give us on that? And any, sort of be interesting to talk about cost, because how are you seeing the cost of putting these types of virtual events on compared to the cost of live, if you want to go to that next level of TV broadcast style? And yeah, so around that sort of Zoom fatigue, challenge, TV, that next shift and the cost implications, because that's what, again, a lot of us are talking about with our internal clients. Yes. Is budget. And
yes, yeah, and we know
how they want to raise the game, but yeah.
And we know that there's going to be a continuous squeeze on budgets, aren't there, as we move through 2021. So in terms of two questions, I'll take them in two parts. In terms of the Zoom fatigue answer and keeping that fresh, I get asked this all the time, and this is the most common question I get asked from my clients, is they're all trying to breathe energy and engagement into their virtual interactions. For me, there are some real key components. Keeping it really short and sharp. It doesn't, length is really key in virtual, and less is more. So I work on a rule of thirds. So if you had a 30-minute presentation, I would cut that into a third of that for a virtual event. So you're looking at turning that into a 10-minute presentation. So I work on thirds when it comes to virtual. So short and sharp. I also work on different opinion and voice. So I work on the basis that whereas in a conference, you might have had your key kind of executive team present, and you can almost write the running order because you know who's presenting. I challenge that, and I look for different opinion and voice. Yes, it's important for the CEO to perhaps have a 5-10 minute keynote, but why can't elements of his or her strategy be brought to life by different people within the business, giving examples of where that strategy is living and breathing? So different opinion and voice. And that moves on to community-driven content. I find the most successful Zoom virtual meeting content is content that's actually come from the people who are watching themselves. That's what I call community-driven content. So they've input into what they want to hear. They have prioritized perhaps issues that they want to hear about in this particular presentation. They've actually generated some of the content, whether that's submitting a photograph or submitting a soundbite or going to someone to hear a little story. So community-driven content, I think, is really important in a remote situation. And again, it's kind of moving to that sort of TV style technique, isn't it? If you're watching TV, you don't just hear from one person on the TV for 20 minutes. There's lots of different input and going on. And I use Comic Relief actually is a really nice example of that. If you look at Comic Relief, yes, you have really content-rich, really serious presentations, but then you have lots of lovely pre-record video that goes into that. You have lots of fun moments, you have lots of community moments, you have lots of moments where you're going to the audience to get input and involvement. So for me, community-driven content is really important in virtual, and interaction and involvement. So making sure that obviously the content's relevant to them by asking their opinion in advance, and then asking for that interactivity all the way through. And as Zoe said, that's about every 5 to 7 minutes. You want them leaning in. You want them you don't want them sat back. You want them leaning in, doing something every 5 to 7 minutes. So that kind of hopefully answers some of the Zoom fatigue elements. In terms of cost, to be honest, in 24 years of doing this, I think there's always a way of finding an approach that fits a budget. You know, that's something I have learnt in 24 years of doing this. But if to do virtual really well does actually start getting close, not this quite the same price tag, but does get close to doing to the same as live events. To do it really well, with lots of pre-recorded video, with lots of time for rehearsal and great production values and so on and so forth. All of a sudden, that does start getting close to where budgets were in live events. but there is always a way. There's always a way of using simpler techniques, but still to keep it elevated. So there's always a way to match the budget a client needs, and I truly believe that in 24 years of doing this.
Yeah, personally, I also think that, well, it's something that we have to embrace. And if you want to go to the TV style production, you know, there has to be studios, and we are seeing venues now around the country. We did there's a video on EMA about London and Partners did it with us, and that I think we've got over 15 venues now in London that have built studios. So the beauty is you're not going to have to pay the 120,000 pounds to build that studio. You're going in and you're paying 15, 20 grand a day to use that studio. And so I think that's really important to find where these studios are, because that's what hotels and venues are doing. And the production companies are seeing they've got this kit. Well, let's do a partnership and put it in place.
I'm also seeing, Richard, that a few clients have said that they're going to start investing in having a little studio in their offices as well. I've been asked to consult on that quite a number of times now, where a client has found a bit of a space and they're actually turning that over into a kind of a green screen filming room.
No, I know many of the big businesses in London, the big banks and everything, have their own theatres and stuff, so they can turn those into them or put extra equipment in. There's quite a few questions sort of popping up. I'm going to ask a couple from the chat space. Out of the platform, so what I'm gathering from what you're saying, you guys are agnostic. You are a production creative agency who can manage the production, but you'll work on any platform, because lots of clients have the platform they want to work on. Is there any that you will recommend?
Yeah, there's so yes, we are completely agnostic, and that's we work for some giant companies, and we are, you know, it's not appropriate for us to go in and tell them how to run their IT or cybersecurity. So of course, in the first instance, we look at what licenses are approved and what platforms are approved, and then so that's always the starting point. Obviously, that data and IT security is the most important thing. Compatibility with all of the different networks to ensure access for people, whether that be from China through to Europe and wherever else. But a platform, I view very much like a venue. And there are, with a venue, you would be looking for different, you look for different venues with different sort of tones and feels, with different availability, with different and different cost points. And actually, I think platforms for me are the same. But Zoe, would you add any more there?
I agree, and I think, you know, it would be very easy for us to sit here and say, yes, we recommend this one and that one, but ultimately it's going to depend on what the objectives are of our clients, you know, brief. What do you want to achieve? We would make the recommendations as to what we know from our experience are the most appropriate platforms to deliver against those objectives. So, you know, you've got the full spectrum of big 3D virtual event, which plays brilliantly to a conference and exhibition style event. And then you've got more of a customer advisory board where it's much more interactive, networking, high level presentations. So, and they're going to be very, very different. So yeah, we've got lots of experience, I think, across the board.
And what we are seeing, as I'm sure you're seeing, is that there's a number of different educational processes now to broaden people's experience and understanding of what's out there. So EMA have set up a partnership with the Virtual Events Institute, where our members get a discount, and again, highly recommend this. And there's quite a few people now have done it, but they're getting a much broader knowledge. And they use a matrix of, okay, so what do you want? And then these that you can do, you got the tick boxes go across. Okay, so these are then the sites, and there is, you know, you could automate that. So, okay, this is what I want it to do. And it says, okay, these are the 3 platforms that could do it, because there's over 200 platforms out there now, I believe, or something.
Well, we've worked, I think we've worked with about 25 over the past 7 months or so. You know, and I urge anyone on this call, if they wanted to follow up, we're going to publish an email address a bit later on in this presentation. If you want to follow up to pick our brains on anything, then please do. Our brains are always available to pick.
Okay. So you touched, I can't remember if it was Zoe or Joe, that you touched on presenters and speakers and the skills and the capabilities of that very different style. And that's what I have learned. I mean, you know, I have to say, you know, I'm pretty comfortable getting on a stage and throwing my arms around and walking up and down and, you know, talking BS for as long as I can. But it's very different. I learned that back in October when we did our first virtual event, and it was in a studio at the Royal Lancaster Hotel. I've got somebody in my ear talking. I've got an audience in front of me, I've 30 people there, and I've got 3 cameras on me. Which camera do I talk to? Going out to another 70 people. And that skill is a totally different skill. I think either on this as well, on, you know, I'm sure we'll all watch this video back and cringe with the stutters that we had and this, that, and the other, and not that natural flow that you see these TV broadcasters have. It's a long-winded question. Speaker training. Do you know, thoughts and views on that? How you get people to acknowledge that they need it?
Yes.
And how you can help them do it? It
is an entirely different skill, isn't it? But actually, funny enough, when I finished doing it with a client, they've all walked off after the broadcast going, "That was brilliant." That was brilliant, and that was actually much easier than doing it in front of 5,000 people live. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think with a broadcast, everything is on. You've got auto cue, so you've got your script in front of you, and I think and I think that presenters find that truly helpful. So when yes, the rehearsal process is really important. The preparation process is really important. And actually find that the rehearsal process is a little bit longer to prepare. But actually, I've found that the presenters have found it much more, have ultimately found it much easier. They've found it easier to talk to a camera in a studio environment ultimately than go out on stage in front of 1,000 or 5,000 people.
Yeah. You just mentioned there, Jo, auto cue, and
yes.
that to me is really, really important in doing broadcast, because it's eye contact.
Yeah.
And wherever you're looking at the camera, there's all camera above each camera and stuff like that. Whereas we're sitting here, of course, I'm looking at my other laptop, because I've got some notes on there, or down a piece of paper straight away. Your head goes down, your eyes go side to side. So it's those simple things that you need to help people. Okay, where is your second screen, or something like that? And,
so on camera prompt, I can't recommend highly enough. It supports presenters beautifully, and it's well worth the investment. For without doubt.
So how do you see the event mix? Because you're I think your market research, and there's a question. Let me jump on that one. There's a question in the inbox about that, your market research. I did speak to Simon last week about this, that you're finalizing that, but I understand you're going to share that. You're happy to share that with us, which we can circulate to our members. Sure. That'd be great. Because someone's asking, could we have a bit more knowledge on that? But from that, and you saw that the poll that you did showed that perhaps our members are a bit different. I think our members have booked things for Q3 provisionally. That's what they're kind of planning for. But if the government say you can't, they won't do it. And so we all know that there is some planning ahead on the hope that we can. But how do you see things shaping up for 2021 and into 22 and beyond? So the mix and shaping of events.
Simon, do you want to pick that one off initially? And then I can.
Yeah, I can do. I mean, as I say, it was from our research, it was pretty unanimous that there was going to be no return to live in Q1 or Q2. And I think, obviously this research was commissioned in November and into December, and we've seen events are moving very quickly. Yeah. And I think we would probably say, well, actually that feels quite obvious now, saying that in the middle of January, knowing what we know now about the vaccine and everything like that. I think, as I alluded to, people's priorities to travel and get together, consumer events, seeing friends and family, enjoying their passions and things that they've not been able to do in their personal lives, they're going to lead the way before people then go into kind of meaningful B2B event activity, and I think, historically we would have never, organised really any events in the July, August summer holiday periods, because people are going to get away. Well, if we can get away, then I think the airports are going to be pretty busy this summer. So automatically, even when we were planning before we did the research last year, the conversation we were having with our clients, we were already looking at September at the earliest because of those reasons. You know, people get back from summer holidays, September's the earliest you're going to do. Obviously, live events require some planning. You need to be confident that you're going to get that audience. You know, are sponsors going to be willing to invest when you're not sure if you're going to get the attendance, and all those kind of things were at play. So that's where it becomes slightly more pessimistic. And then we do the events, you know, the research that we commissioned, and it was really looking at, you know, possibly some small scale things towards the end of, you know, the end of the year, October, November, where people were thinking, but we were really thinking into, you know, to 2022. My wife's an epidemiologist. She used to work with Chris Whitty, so I've kind of got my in-house consultant here, and
fast track.
People have different views on the science and the politics, the communications, all the rest of it. I don't want to go into that, but you know, there will be social distancing and certain restrictions through at least into Q1 2022 as well. So again, are you going to really enjoy that experience of a live event if, you know, you're distanced and it's a big ballroom or whatever? We can't, you know, be 100% what it's going to look like. So I think, you know, we're seeing that, you know, it will start small, it will start local, but virtual is going to be an integral part of this mix moving forward. You know, we're using that term, the events mix. You know, it's going to be a key part of it, certainly for sharing content. I think the live event experiences are going to be about the experience and about the conversation element. So Joe talked about content and conversation, very broad strokes. Virtual is for content, live is for conversation and that kind of networking piece. But they're all going to need to, you know, to integrate. That content's going to need to be on demand. And how are you going to curate that content? You know, we as consumers are used to using Netflix or iPlayer or whatever. You know, we're going to need to start to move towards those kind of standards of content curation, and so that all of that hangs together. And so I think, you know, the event teams and the event managers are going to become a much more integrated part of the marketing and communications function, and also that much closer to the business as well.
I think I'm going to be tapping you to see if we can get Mrs. Mogford on here to have a little chat with us about the epidemiology.
She's very expensive.
I'll send you a beer.
Sold.
You touched on as well there briefly, and I think this flips to also what you're talking about, Joe, is around revenue and sponsorship. So, you know, a lot of our members sponsor events on other for third parties, you know, sort of private equity conferences or, you know, the big events. They also, some have associations for the industries and have sponsors on their events. How do you see that being affected of creating value for sponsors? And then also there's a question here about tiering your revenue streams, I think is really interesting. So there's a cost to attend, there's a cost to go virtual, there's a cost to watch post-event recording or something. Thoughts, views, very broad.
Yeah.
Charge for anything you can is my view, but.
Yeah, well, again, a question we've been asked quite frequently around maximising revenue opportunities in virtual. So do you want to kick off on that?
Absolutely, yeah, I think you're right, Richard. Really, it's about identifying what those opportunities are that are going to give maximum exposure for best possible return on, you know, revenue. Really, you know, there are a number of different ways. I think, again, much like everything with virtual, we have to try and get out of the mindset of what worked in live, and we have to think about what works in virtual. You know, so, you know, offering different ways for sponsors to get value out of those events. So is it that we give, you know, short adverts, TV adverts, you know, and, you know, they can get products across that way. And, you know, we have to think about the audience and what they're viewing and how they then consume that, and what the value is that sponsors can get in return. So again, it really does depend on the type of the event. You know, we have exhibition booths, there's different ways to, you know, to engage that way, but there are other different trains of thought for a TV quality type broadcast event where sponsors can get value in those ways as well. So and especially if content is on demand for a long period of time, there's huge value in sort of short TV advert style you know, videos that sponsors can continue to get promotion from. So
yeah, it's an interesting piece of work that we as EMA are doing. We're working with a piece of technology platform that's got some government funding to develop technology. It's all around sustainability and diversity, but it's also about, you know, virtual networking. And they've been engaged with a human psychologist who is talking about, okay, well, you know, how you network at a live event, you cannot replicate that in a virtual event, and you touched on that. So it's about finding ways that how you can, and you know, their process is very much what they're coming up with, and this is where EMA are going to be consulting. We've got a little working group going into the thing to consult, and we get some revenue out of it. But it's around workshops, so developing workshops, so breakout groups and workshops and small groups to work together and talk about something which is part of the bigger content. But that in those workshops, they then get an opportunity to network. In a sort of, and it's finding it different, and that's what the you know, this psychologist who was talking to us about is, you know, don't try to think you replicate exactly what you did before in this world.
No, it really can't, because it won't fit and it won't work. Without doubt, the most successful networking I've seen so far are bringing people into groups of like-minded interests, and even that's down to something as fun and as light-hearted as I've broken people out into groups based on TV shows that they like. You know, it doesn't have to be big highbrow stuff, but just getting people to connect with a shared interest in mind, whether that be fun or serious, is the best way in small groups to replicate networking online.
So there's a question here I want to throw at you, and probably not your area. Maybe, I don't know if you've done stuff, but what do you think about corporate hospitality as an event and as an engagement? Do you think that's going to be around in the future, or when is it going to come back? So, you know, I know Simon loves to go to Old Trafford when not so Old Trafford. Go and watch Liverpool play at Anfield.
Careful, Richard.
But yeah, you know, we've got Chelsea Flower Show, Wimbledon talked about here. These are massive events, and massive business opportunities.
I think it's I think the low-hanging fruit, as it were, are bringing small groups of people together locally, so where it doesn't involve jumping on a plane and so on and so forth. So perhaps in keeping with that, we'll see corporate hospitality start coming back in small group safe ways towards the end of the year, perhaps. But I think that's how it will probably start, I would imagine, with corporate hospitality.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested. You know, a box that could take, let's say, 14 people, are they only going to let 6 people in that box? And I mean, the cost of that. We're going to see 80,000 seater stadiums only having 20,000 people in.
Whereas you could do an online virtual event where you get 20 minutes with that famous sports person to go and have an up close and personal Q&A, you know, and that would be a once in a lifetime experience as well. So you can, I think it'd be about. I know,
absolutely. Integration of sports personalities, personal commentation. You just give me an idea. Is that, could you then flick that between, we're going to have this, and then you can watch the rugby on the telly, or stream the rugby through your television screen. So but we've also got our own personal commentator, you know, like they do at the hospitality suites at the rugby and stuff. Then talking to us. Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? Okay, guys, we're gonna start wrapping up. Guys, anything else you'd like to tell anybody or anything? I mean, I think it's really interesting. We copied it. We posted the video. We've written some notes. We'll circulate those to our members. We give you your contact details. The door is open, as you say, Jo.
Absolutely. We love virtual events. We have really built unrivaled experience through our client base over the past 6 or 7 months. Get in touch. No matter how small or big the challenge, we love it all. So please get in touch.
Yeah, we love having virtual coffees. So open to, as Joe said, I mean, really we're sort of just here, the conversation we're having with prospective clients, other industry people, is just in the guise of, helping people. We've all been through a very turbulent and roller coaster few months. I think best way I've seen it described is, we were all in the same storm, but in different boats we've all
Yes.
got our own kind of unique personal challenges and business challenges that we're sort of dealing with. So, you know, if anybody wants any advice just on platforms or wants specific help with a program or whatever it might be, then, you know, we're very open just to having a conversation and helping where we can.
Okay, guys. So again, thank you very much to Aspect Communication for sharing their sights and in thoughts with us. Very useful. Great kickoff for 2021. Feel so old saying that. And we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for inviting us.